It's really strange that Smash's most well-known stages were not even playable in Smash 64. Final Destination, an early version of what would later be known as Battlefield, were not playable outside of single-player mode. In fact, this was called Dual Zone back in the day. Another stage that I always thought was weird was Meta Crystal, or also known as Metal Cavern. The stage is very well known in Smash's overall community, despite it only existing in single-player mode for 64. This is also where you fight Metal Mario. It's got a creepy, ominous vibe to the stage. It always felt like one of my personal favorites, despite it only being played here. It being loosely based on Mario 64's Hazy Maze Cave, or the fact that the stage, has a very iconic slant. It's cool, okay? Different gameplay. Peach's Castle is the first Mario stage in the series. You would think this is an iconic stage, but it doesn't return until Smash 4 as DLC. The stage has two main platforms. The platform on the top is a soft platform and slants on both sides, and the stage's layout is mostly known for having an iconic floating bumper at the middle of the stage that remains stationary the whole time. This is where the hijinks ensues. When you play this game and try to recover, the platforms can be a problem as they move in and out and you can't really grab them easily. It can definitely destroy certain recovery attempts, which is why it wouldn't come back for a much longer time until Smash 4. I would have thought a stage like this would never come back in future Smash games because a future spiritual successor existed. But you know what? That doesn't fully count, as most of the stages are brought back in Smash Ultimate, and you can thank Smash 4's DLC for reviving this stage and fixing a lot of the problems that it used to have, especially with its ledges, although it's still banned in competitive play, obviously. Mushroom Kingdom started out as the first ever hidden stage in the series. For a long time, I didn't even know this stage was even in the game. You'll never see this stage in single player mode, which is kind of strange. The stage has various moving platforms, and if you sit there long enough, they will fall into the pit. In the pit, characters can wall jump out of it, or they can use one of the pipes that are hidden down below. And it's also one of the few stages in 64 to have wall blast zones, as you can walk off of them and die. And yes, you can go in the pipes. This is 10 out of 10 game design right here. I thought this was so cool as a kid. But it's a really neat way to design a stage in very subtle ways. I love little stuff like this. It didn't return for a long time. The pipes must have been too cool or something. But when the stage did return, it was Smash Ultimate. And it has a new, brighter look to the stage that makes it more saturated. They also patched out the little exploit of if you try to spam going into the warp pipe, that doesn't really work. There's 13 seconds cooldown to limit this. There's even a chance for the Piranha Plant to come out of the pipe and potentially KO at higher percentages. No, not that Piranha Plant, this Piranha Plant. And there's also a POW block that appears in the 64 version. It deals a lot of damage and knockback. In Ultimate, they toned down how strong it was. Super Happy Tree, originally known as Yoshi's Island, this stage is obviously based on Yoshi's story. The stage is actually very large, and there's slanted main platform on the bottom with 3 platforms tilted at different sides. The stage is massive, and there's a portion of the stage that a lot of people forget about, as there's clouds and platforms near on the right side. The clouds will actually disappear after standing on them for a few seconds, so this can actually benefit a lot of recoveries and setups for edge guarding. And there's even a single player version of the stage that lacks any clouds on the side and is a lot smaller. This is probably the version that most people will remember. And it also makes a return in Melee, as though it doesn't really return for a few games after this, it would return in Ultimate with a smaller side blast zones, and the stage would mostly be banned despite it looking somewhat competitive, but it's not really played in competitive play. It's just way too big. It definitely promotes a lot of camping, and although the stage can sometimes be played in doubles, but usually in order to do this you would have to mod, and not everyone's for that. Congo Jungle is a stage with a dark nighttime theme with nice orange hues on it. It looks really cool, and the stage is obviously based on Donkey Kong Country. It's built on slopes that go downward, and it has 2 trees on both sides that have platforms at the very top. There's also 2 extra platforms that move in a circular motion, and this stage is also obviously has the barrel that is spinning at the very bottom, and if you land in the barrel you can choose where it will shoot you out. This can be used to your benefit, whether it's improving characters' recoveries or the exact opposite, putting you into the blast zone where you die. And the stage made its way in Melee as well as a 1-to-1 copy, and this stage would be absent in Brawl, but it would return in Smash 4 and Ultimate, where it has more higher quality look while maintaining the 64 art style. The larger blast zones are also reduced in the Ultimate version, thank God. And the stage obviously was banned early on in Melee's meta. People would experiment playing on it, but it just was banned over time. Sometimes people do try to play it in doubles. More power to you if you do. Hyrule Castle is one of the stages that is truly a product of the N64's more limited angular polygons. Despite the look of the stage, it's easily one of the most iconic stages in the game. It's really wide, and that's an understatement here, taking place on top of Hyrule Castle. In the center, there's 3 platforms that can help extend aerial follow-ups, while also the left side there's more of a long slanted roof. And on the right side, there's a smaller section with a gazebo. There's probably gonna be some close-knit fighting going on there. You can wall jump off the sides of the stage, and there's also a random tornado that will show up and throw characters that fall into it. If it isn't obvious, the stage is not legal in competitive play unless you're playing in Japan, or some doubles tournaments will experiment with it, but it still is one of the most iconic stages in this game because of just how common it's used for combo contests. It wouldn't return until Smash Wii U and 3DS as DLC. While the stages always had their old school look for it, they did update it in Smash Ultimate. Planet Zebus is also on 64. It's one of the few stages to never return in a future Smash game. To be real, the purpose has probably been overshadowed by future Metroid stages that fill a similar niche. With the rising acid or lava gimmick, this stage essentially has platforms that stay static, and then at the bottom floor having slants. Touching the acid in this game can easily KO the opponents, although when the acid rises, it can indirectly save people from self-destructing down below. A little bit of a plus negative there. Sector Z is another red-headed stepchild stage because it never returned in future Smash games. But to be honest, and pun intended, the stage is clearly done better in future Smash games. The obvious spiritual successor being Corneria, where the stage is very similar but it's not as big. Sector Z is one of the largest stages in the game. It is that big. It is massive. In fact, in competitive play, other than the obvious lasers that are a part of this stage, the other reason this stage is notoriously banned is for camping. It's so easy to run the clock on this stage because you can just run away. The fact that the stage is so massive is, you can guess why it's never really returned in future Smash games. It's too big. The main action areas of the stage are the tip to wing section. There's a section where people can camp their projectiles and spam at the bottom pocket section behind the wing, which characters definitely love to scrap here as well and do combos. Obviously, like I mentioned, Corneria sort of redefined what this stage was trying to do. R-wings occasionally fire during the match just like they do in Corneria. They expanded on the concepts like making these ships' guns actually fire, which was good job, Sakurai. Saffron City being the obvious reference to Pokemon's first generation, and the stage is taking place on the rooftops of Saffron City. And I'm not gonna lie, these buildings are kind of small, but whatever, that's besides the point. A lot of things don't make sense in Smash. Although this isn't a complete spiritual successor, I feel like Foresight and Melee has a similar concept going on here. The building in the middle is slanted while the other buildings are on the left side, and there's one on the right side as well. The blast zones on the stage are closer than they actually appear. And that's always been a weird novelty to this stage. There's 2 moving platforms that are on the lower left side. More importantly, the bigger novelty of this stage is in the middle, there will be a random Pokemon that will pop out every so often. Now, obviously this stage is banned in competitive play because, just look at this. Because of its hugeness and its strange blast zones and the obvious Pokemon spawns in the middle of the stage, the buildings are way too close to each other and it totally destroys some characters' recoveries. You get the point. And I saved the best for last. You can't talk about Smash 64 without talking about Dreamland. Now, obviously being based on the location in the Kirby games, this stage is known for having a neutral layout. It's very similar to Battlefield. Having 3 platforms, the floor of the stage is shaped like a pineapple, so it's very common for recoveries to get sniped by the very wide bottom of the stage. It's also known as getting pineappled. More importantly, wispy that will blow wind. Wind will blow towards one side of the stage every so often, and fun fact, they reused the exact wind mechanic in Green Greens, which is a stage that has a very similar theme in Melee. Notice how a lot of these stages have a sort of spiritual successor in Melee? It's a little interesting. Dreamland would actually be absent in Brawl, but it would return in the Wii U and 3DS as DLC, and obviously return in Ultimate. This stage is very well known. It's probably one of the most iconic stages in all of Smash because of its standard layout, its very iconic theme that plays a lot, and it's one of the few legal stages in 64 and Melee and Smash 4 and Ultimate, I guess, maybe sometimes. It's usually depending on the tournament, and I always thought it was weird that this stage was always legal because of the wind, but to be honest, it's not really common to have the wind actually affect a match that frequently. It does happen sometimes, we've all seen it though. King Dedede will also sometimes show up in the background along with the Bronto Burns. In future Smash games, the stage is known for its size. In Melee, it's actually slightly larger than the 64 version, along with having a higher ceiling because the size, it's actually considered a really good stage if you're a lighter character with poor survivability like Peach or Jigglypuff. Because of its size, floatier characters can drift away and effectively try to escape out of hits. Dreamland shrunk significantly in Smash 4, now being roughly the same size as Battlefield, and this is why the stage is not a counterpick. This also made it more neutral than before, and even the platforms being closer together, which makes it favor characters with vertical combo games, like Cloud, for example. Oddly enough, the stage acts as though its main platform is actually slightly off-center, which is probably an oversight, but it's kind of funny. In Ultimate, the stage is almost identical to Battlefield again, especially with hazards off being a thing why people normally don't play Dreamland, usually seen as kind of redundant. Especially with the ability to turn hazards off, yeah, a lot of people just don't want to play with Wispy. Considering it's very similar to Battlefield, just why even play there, I guess. RIP Dreamland. Some final interesting tidbits of goodness is the tutorial stage. It's actually a playable stage in the code of the game that's not accessible for normal play. Many people note how this stage especially looks like it could be Dreamland without the tree in the middle, and missing two other platforms especially and having the same background. The stage is really cheesy as the blast zones are not placed correctly. I mean, duh, the stage is not accessible, what do you expect? I mean, there's a platform on the side that is actually grabbable, come on. It's just not finished. The two other leftover stages being literally called Small and New, again look like placeholder stages. These are actually stages that are most likely inspired by early versions of Dreamland, as Small almost has the exact same platform layout, and New has a similar theme, but maybe the devs were experimenting with making the stage be larger and having more casual appeal. Again, their collisions are absolutely silly. What do you expect? This is content only accessible in the debug menu. Anyways guys, that is the video. Thank you guys so much for watching. There's a Patreon down below. There's a Discord for honest content. There's also an Instagram. Follow me on Instagram, Zach Honest. Thank you so much. Take care. Have a good day.